If only I had left the room when they asked me to sit down. If only I had understood that the silence before someone speaks can be louder than any accusation. But I did not leave. I sat down in the armchair by the window, the one that faced the entire living room, and I waited. My name is Lydia. I am 36 years old, and that Sunday afternoon, I walked into an ambush disguised as a family meeting. The living room felt staged. Everyone was there. My husband Dominic, his parents, his 2 siblings, all sitting in neat formation like this had been rehearsed. No one looked angry. No one raised their voice. That was the first thing that terrified me. In arguments people yell. In confrontations people accuse. But this was neither. This was calm, controlled, coordinated. Dominic would not meet my eyes. He sat on the couch between his mother and his older brother, hands folded in his lap like a child waiting for permission to speak. His mother, Patricia, sat with her back perfectly straight, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. And then she slid a folder across the coffee table toward me and said, her voice soft and steady, "This is what is best for everyone." I stared at that folder. I did not open it, because I already knew what it contained. They had been planning this for weeks. Earlier that week we were still or at least I thought we were. Dominic and I had been married for 4 years. We had met at a work conference, fallen in love over long dinners and longer conversations, and married in a small ceremony that his family had planned down to the napkin colors. I thought I was marrying a partner. Instead, I married into a system. The conversation that Sunday had started days earlier, quietly, over a dinner at his parents' house. It began as a discussion about our future. Then it became a concern about my priorities. Then, without warning, it turned into a decision about what needed to happen next. I noticed something subtle at that dinner. No one asked me what I wanted. They spoke about my future as if I were not in the room. Patricia mentioned that Dominic had been under stress. His brother Theo said something about needing clarity. His younger sister, Claire, nodded along, her face sympathetic but her eyes distant. And I sat there, fork in hand, realizing that this was not a conversation. It was a conclusion, one they had already reached without me. Before any of this, my husband's family was admired. Everyone said so. They were generous, organized, always hosting charity events, always helping someone move or donate or rebuild after a crisis. Patricia ran the neighborhood association. Theo volunteered at the local food bank. Claire organized fundraisers for the school district. When I married into the family, people congratulated me like I had won something. "You are so lucky," friends said. "They are such good people." And they were. They offered help easily, advice freely, support publicly. Patricia helped me find a better job when I was looking. Theo co-signed a loan when Dominic and I bought our first car. Claire invited me to her book club and introduced me to her friends. They folded me into their lives so smoothly that I did not notice the moment when support became surveillance, when help became control. Which is why, when things began to shift, no one questioned them. Why would they? The family that everyone trusted must have good reasons for their concerns. And I must have been the problem. The first thing they took was not money. It was authority. Suddenly, plans were made without me. Schedules changed, and I found out from Dominic after the fact. Conversations happened in rooms I was not invited into, behind closed doors that opened only after decisions had been made. When I asked why I had not been included, Dominic said, "We did not want to bother you. You have been busy with work." When I asked why his mother was making decisions about our vacation plans, he said, "She was just trying to help." When I insisted on being part of the conversation, Patricia smiled kindly and said, "Of course, dear. We just thought you were overwhelmed." And when I pushed back, when I said I was not overwhelmed and I wanted to be involved, Dominic sighed and said, "You need to rest. You are not thinking clearly." That phrase became a pattern. Every time I questioned something, every time I resisted, I was told I was tired, stressed, not thinking clearly. And slowly I began to believe it. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was making problems where there were none. Then came the label. You are being emotional. That sentence ended more conversations than any argument ever could. My husband used it gently, like he was comforting a child who had scraped her knee. His family used it strategically in front of others, so that anyone listening would nod and think, "Poor thing, she is going through something." Each time I spoke up, someone nodded sympathetically. Not at me. Them. Dominic. At Patricia. As if to say, "We understand. She is difficult right now." That was when I understood. They were not trying to hear me. They were documenting me. Every emotional reaction, every raised voice, every moment of frustration was being catalogued. Not to understand me. To use against me later. I realized this one evening when I overheard Patricia on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking to someone, her voice low and calm. "She has been very emotional lately," Patricia said. "We are all worried. Dominic is trying to be supportive, but it has been hard on him." I stood in the hallway frozen. Because I had not been emotional. I had been questioning. And they had reframed every question as instability. Friends stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. People I had known for years suddenly spoke to me carefully, like I might shatter if they said the wrong thing. First I thought I was imagining it. Then I started asking, "Why did not you invite me to the barbecue last weekend?" I asked Hannah, a friend from work. She hesitated. "I thought you were going through something. I did not want to intrude." "Who told you that?" Yes. She looked uncomfortable. "Patricia mentioned it when I ran into her at the grocery store. She said you were dealing with a lot and might need space." I felt my stomach drop. Patricia had been talking to my friends, explaining my condition on my behalf. I later learned she had done this with several people. Coffee with my coworkers. Casual conversations with neighbors. Always sympathetic. Always concerned. Always painting a picture of a woman who was struggling. I never asked who else she had spoken to. Already knew. And I knew that trying to correct the narrative would only make me look more unstable. So I stopped trying to explain. I just watched. Then my husband apologized. It happened on a Tuesday night after dinner. We were sitting on the couch, the television on but neither of us watching it. Dominic turned to me and said, "I am sorry." His voice was soft, genuine. "My family has been worried about us. About you. Think things went too far. I will fix it." For the first time in weeks I felt relief. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe we could go back to how things were before. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, a formal notice arrived in the mail. It was addressed to me. The envelope was thick, the paper inside crisp and professional. It was a letter from a mediator, suggesting that Dominic and I attend counseling sessions to work through recent challenges. The tone was polite. The language was careful. But the intent was clear. This was not a suggestion. It was a step in a process. Process I had not agreed to. A process that had already begun without me. It was an email that told me the truth. I was not supposed to see it. Dominic had left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he showered. A notification popped up. An email from his mother. The subject line said, "Timeline update." I should not have looked. But I did. The email was brief. Efficient. Outline dates. Talking points. Timing strategies. Week 1. Begin expressing concerns to mutual friends. Week 2. Suggest counseling. Week 3. Present formal options. There were more details. Contingencies. Responses to potential objections. This was not concern. This was coordination. And it had started long before I knew there was a problem. I took a photo of the email with my phone. Then I closed the laptop. When Dominic came back downstairs, I smiled and asked him about his day. He smiled back, relieved that I seemed calm. He had no idea what I had just learned. Once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. Every conversation aligned with a deadline. Every act of support, coincided with pressure to make a decision. They were not reacting to problems as they arose. They were executing a plan. Week by week, step by step. I went back through my calendar and matched events to the timeline in that email. The dinner where they first expressed concerns. The coffee date where Patricia suggested I take time off work. The phone call where Theo offered to help us find a new apartment, just in case we needed space. All of it lined up. All of it was deliberate. They were not worried about me. They were managing me. And the goal was not to help our marriage. It was to end it. On their terms. On their timeline. Someone quiet pulled me aside at a family gathering the following weekend. It was Claire's husband, Owen. He was not close to the family. He had always been on the periphery, polite but distant. We were standing near the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room. Owen glanced toward the door, then spoke in a low voice. "They need you to panic," he said. I looked at him, startled. "What?" "They need you to act early," he continued. "Before certain things activate. Before protections kick in. If you react now, if you make a move now, you lose leverage." He did not explain further. He just looked at me seriously and said, "Do not give them what they want." Then he walked away. That was the first useful advice I had heard in months. And I took it. It was not revenge they wanted. It was not anger. It was control. Control of assets. Control of the narrative. Control of the timing. I started digging into our finances, our legal arrangements, the documents we had signed when we got married. There was a clause in our marriage agreement. A provision that activated if we were married for 5 years. It involved property rights, shared investments, and protections I had not fully understood when I signed it. We were 4 years and 3 months into the marriage. 6 months away from that clause taking effect. And they needed the marriage to end before it did. That was why the timeline in Patricia's email was so specific. That was why the pressure had intensified in recent weeks. They needed things resolved quickly. They needed me rushed. So I stopped rushing. I stopped reacting. I stopped giving them the panic they expected. Instead, I became very, very calm. Became agreeable. When Patricia suggested another counseling session, I nodded and said, "That sounds helpful." When Dominic mentioned that maybe we should start thinking about our future separately, I said, "Let me think about it." When Theo offered to help me look at apartments, I thanked him and said I would let him know. I stopped resisting. I stopped arguing. Smiled. I was polite. I was cooperative. And they relaxed. Patricia stopped watching me so closely. Dominic stopped tiptoeing around conversations. Theo stopped calling to check in. They thought I had accepted the situation. They thought I was coming around to their plan. Confidence is dangerous when it is premature. And theirs was growing every day. At a family gathering in late September, they chose sides publicly. It was Patricia's birthday party. 50 people in the backyard. Tables set up with careful precision. Everyone laughing and talking and drinking wine under string lights. And I was alone. Not physically. I was standing near the dessert table. But no one came to talk to me. Dominic was across the yard with his siblings. Patricia was holding court near the house. Theo and Claire moved through the crowd, greeting friends, hugging cousins. And I stood there watching. At one point, Patricia raised her glass and made a toast. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about family and support and sticking together through difficult times. And everyone looked at Dominic. Not at me. Him. Like he was the one who needed support. Like he was the victim in whatever story they had been told. Thought good. Let everyone remember this. Let them remember who stood where when this is over. Deadlines approached. The 5-year mark was 6 weeks away. Then 5 weeks. Then 4. The pressure increased. Phone calls multiplied. Patricia called me 3 times in 1 week. "Just checking in," she said each time. Dominic asked me almost daily if I had thought about the separation agreement his lawyer had drafted. Theo sent me links to apartments near my office. Just in case. Delayed. I said I needed time. I said I wanted to think it through carefully. I asked questions that required long answers. I requested clarifications on documents they sent me. I pushed back consultations. I rescheduled meetings. Just small delays. Nothing that looked like resistance. Just enough to slow things down. 1 week at a time. Filed something small. Unremarkable. A request to update our joint financial accounts with corrected information. Technicality. The kind of thing that looks like routine paperwork. The bank processed it without question. Dominic signed it without reading it carefully. His family did not even know it had happened. But that small filing changed the timeline. Triggered a review period. A mandatory waiting period before any major financial changes could be made. 30 days. Just enough time to cross the 5-year threshold. Changed nothing in the moment. But it changed everything for what came next. Their tone shifted. Suddenly the offers improved. The separation agreement was revised. More favorable terms. Better financial arrangements. They stopped being polite and patient. They started being urgent. Patricia called me and said, "We really need to move forward with this, Lydia. For everyone's sake." Dominic said, "I do not understand why you are dragging this out. It is not helping anyone." Theo stopped by the house unannounced and said, "You know this is going to happen eventually. Why not just get it over with?" That was how I knew the timing mattered. They had realized they were running out of time. And they were starting to panic. Even Owen doubted me. He pulled me aside at another gathering and said, "Are you sure you know what you are doing? It looks like you are losing." I almost believed it too. The separation papers were drafted. The counseling sessions had concluded with a recommendation that we separate. Dominic had already moved some of his things to his parents' house. Friends had stopped asking how I was doing. They had accepted that the marriage was over. It looked like I had lost. Like I had delayed the inevitable but changed nothing. Almost. But I knew something they did not. I knew the date that mattered. And it was 3 days away. A deadline passed. Quietly. Permanently. On October 15th at midnight, we crossed the 5-year mark of our marriage. The clause activated. I received confirmation the next morning from the legal firm that had drafted our marriage agreement. The protections were now in effect. Property rights. Asset protections. Everything we had built during the marriage was now covered under different terms. Terms that could not be bypassed by a rushed separation. I did not celebrate. I did not call anyone. I just read the email twice, saved it and waited. Everything they had said early, every coordinated message, every carefully timed conversation resurfaced. I'd saved the emails. I had documented the timeline. I had recorded the moments when plans were made without me, when decisions were presented as conclusions. What had once looked like concern now looked like manipulation. What had once seemed like support now seemed like strategy. And timing exposed intent. When their lawyer reviewed the case, he saw the pattern. He saw the pressure. He saw the coordination. And he saw that it had all been designed to force a resolution before the 5-year clause took effect. Did not look good. Not for them. They turned on each other. Dominic blamed his mother for pushing too hard. Patricia blamed Theo for being too obvious. Claire stayed silent but stopped attending family dinners. The unity that had made them so effective fractured under the weight of their miscalculation. Someone reached out to me privately. It was Theo. He sent a text message. "I am sorry. I did not realize how far this had gone." I did not respond. There was nothing to say. The damage was done. And I did not need his apology. I needed the process to finish. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending my actions. I stopped trying to make anyone understand. I let the process speak. The legal proceedings moved forward. The clause was upheld. The protections were enforced. And I said nothing publicly. Silence became my strategy. Because the more I stayed quiet, the louder their actions became. Whispers replaced praise. People who had once spoken about Patricia's generosity now spoke about her interference. Friends who had once called Theo reliable now called him calculating. The reputation they had built over years began to crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly, steadily. People noticed. They always do. Eventually. And once they start noticing, they start questioning everything they thought they knew. The delay was not hesitation. It was protection. Everything they had rushed to avoid had activated. The clause they did not fully understand had taken effect. The timeline they had tried to control had passed them by. And now, the very thing they had tried to prevent was the thing that protected me. The assets they thought they could divide quickly were now subject to different terms. The control they thought they could maintain was no longer theirs to hold. I had not fought them loudly. I had just waited. And in waiting I had won. They lost what they tried to control. Not dramatically. Not in a single explosive moment. But precisely. Piece by piece. The separation terms were rewritten. The property division was renegotiated. The narrative they had carefully constructed unraveled as people realized what had really happened. Dominic and I divorced. But not on their timeline. Not under their terms. And not without consequences for the way they had tried to manipulate the process. Patricia stopped hosting gatherings. Theo moved to another city. Claire apologized quietly, in a letter I never answered. And Dominic learned what it felt like to be managed by people who claimed to love him. If only they had not rushed. If only they had not chosen sides so publicly, so early, so confidently. If only they had understood that speed is not the same as power. But they did not. They thought urgency was strength. They thought coordination was control. They thought I would panic, react, and make a mistake that would let them win. But timing was always the real power. And I had chosen mine carefully. They picked sides before the divorce. Picked timing. And in the end, timing was everything. The woman they underestimated, the woman they labeled emotional and unstable, had simply been waiting, watching, documenting. And when the moment came, I did not raise my voice. I did not fight. I just let the clock run out. And when it did, everything they tried to take was no longer theirs to claim. Silence was not weakness. Patience was not surrender. And timing, as it turned out, was the only strategy that mattered.